الله تعالى نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Him. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Those who are guided by Allah, no one can misguide them. Those who are not guided by Allah, there is no guide for them. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and messenger. O you who believe, revere Allah as He should be revered, and die not except as Muslims. Amma ba'd. To proceed. Welcome to ISLAM Inc., the Islamic Society Leading American Muslims, an organization that was established to do dawah in the United States of America, to invite people to the true and peaceful message of Islam, and then to educate and empower those people that came. And later, we modified our group because we found out that there were many people born into Islam that wanted to be nurtured, they wanted a safe place to come, and so we invited them in as well. We have a policy at ISLAM Inc., the Islamic Society Leading American Muslims, that there's no criticism and no condemnation. So if anybody criticizes you while you're here, let me know, and I will beat them up in the parking lot at the end of class. And my mom will take her stick and beat you too. She's backing me up on that. We are kidding, but I'm not kidding about that being our policy. I've never met anyone that grew by being beat up or criticized or condemned. So we want you to feel like you're in a place, no matter where you are spiritually, that you are in a place where you can grow and be empowered. And so that's the kind of culture that we have here at ISLAM Inc., and we welcome you here today. We do have some new folks with us today, and we're very happy to have them here. And so would you mind standing and introducing yourself?
Oh. Don't be shy.
Hello, my name is Yazan.
And may I have permission to tell them about you? Yazan found out about the class through the masjid. Yazan has been in the country 23 years. He is Palestinian descent, right? MashaAllah. So we're very happy to have Yazan. And would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
My name is Amanda.
And Amanda is Yazan's friend. And we're very, very happy to have you here. Amanda, you embraced Islam during Ramadan?
Very beginning of Ramadan.
MashaAllah. Well, we're very happy to have you. I think you'll get some numbers from all these sisters today. We are a family, and that's what we are. We have a potluck every month. We get together, and sometimes it's catered. Sometimes you bring food and we share. But we're here to make sure that you have a support system. So please get numbers. And who else is here for the first time? Anybody else today that I missed? MashaAllah. Well, I can see that last week we had 70, how many? 76 people in class. I have all ideas that we're operating on Muslim Standard Time, so about 12 o'clock we'll probably have more people in here. That's usually the way it works. And one day I'm praying that Muslims will learn the value of time, and they'll be on time, inshallah. But we're just glad to have you when you get here. Alhamdulillah. I want to make some announcements. We have a cell phone drive. If you have a cell phone in the bottom drawer, the top drawer, under the refrigerator, under the bed, in a bowl on top of the refrigerator, crammed into your glove compartment that you don't use, we take those phones. We don't need the cord. We don't need any of the accoutrements that go with it. We just need the phone, and we give those to Harbor House, and they're turned into phones to be used for victims of domestic violence. Also, dry food drive. If you'd like to bring a can of food or a bag of beans or something, ISLA gives food every week to a local food bank here. Good to see you, Lionel.
See you.
Thank you. If you're not getting messages and notices from ISLAM Inc., see my sister Maysoon, who is standing up over there waving her hand. Please add Islam Inc. 411 at Gmail to your safe list. Otherwise, it might go to spam. You might be getting it and don't know it. Or email it to us and we'll add you to the list. We still need a venue for September's potluck, which would be September the what? 28th. And we're working on that now. We usually do it in a home, but we've grown so big that we may be moving to a hotel this time, but we'll see. We're selling honey. So if you haven't had your honey lately, we're selling honey, and it is local Florida honey, which is the best kind of honey to have. It's good for allergies and all that kind of stuff. We're selling it for $30. You can't beat that price. There's also some books for sale over there. If you're interested in any of the books, see Rushta. Her hand is up over there. She's handling the book sales.
Sorry, the honey is local, organic, raw honey.
Local organic raw, yes. Can't beat it. You got allergies, this is the way to handle it. It's also from the sunnah to have honey every day. So, we're working on a fathers group, so at the last 10 minutes of the class today, you do not have to be a father to join this group.
Men's group.
But it's a men's group is what we should call it. And the whole focus is to educate men on who you are Islamically, for us to talk about struggles that we might have, and for us to develop ourselves as model men in the community. So anyone, whoever plans to get married, and that's everybody because that's how you complete your faith Islamically, and you're a man in this group and you're invited to come to the meeting afterwards, inshallah, I think it's something that's past due. We've been needing to do this for a long time. So that's the announcements for today. Would anybody like to share what we've been talking about in the class? Anybody, anything?
Science in the Quran.
The science of the Quran, exactly, the miracles of the Quran. And I want to show you two books. This is one. How many people have seen this before? How many have not seen this before? Okay, 1, 2, mashallah. This was the sort of impetus that got me going. Actually, that's not true. This was an impetus. The first impetus was a class that I took when I did my master's in Islamic studies called The Miracle of the Qur'an. But these are scientific miracles that are in the Quran, and this is where I started. And then I found Harun Yahya and this book, Miracles of the Quran, and some great websites. I don't recommend Sheikh Google, by the way. Sheikh Google can lead you astray. But there is a few good websites out there. If you enjoy the class, you don't have to go to the website because I'll give it to you. But you'll notice that I do give credit to Harun Yahya in the class, and I give credit to any of the sites that we mentioned or any of the references that I talk about, because I think it's important to give credit where credit's due. Last week, we ended the class by talking about how the prohibition of blood is in the Quran, and we talked about some of how easy it is for you to get sick if your blood is tainted in any way. But I just wanted to add one more note to this. Part of why we eat halal is this prohibition of blood. We drain all the blood out of our meat. Why? Because there's disease in blood. So I just wanted to add that to this. And then I told you that today we would be starting with radio receivers on mountains. Let me just blow my notes up. And from Surah Sabah, Surah 34 and verse 10, we gave David, and by the way, Amanda, I'll tickle you a little bit. since this is your first time here, if I say a word and you don't know what it means, raise your hand. We are didactic learning. We break up into groups very often and discuss what we've learned, and then one person from the group shares for the group. If I use a word, anybody here that you don't know what it means, please raise your hand, because I don't want you to walk away and not understand what I'm saying. Daud means David, okay? We gave David great favor from us. O mountains and birds, echo with him in his praise. If we have time, not only will we talk about the mountains today, which we've talked about before, but this is going to be in reference to radio waves. We're going to talk about birds as well. And we made iron malleable for him. And last week we talked about the miracle of iron. Remember?
Yes.
Okay. The description of mountains echoing in the above verse may be a reference to the way the radios work. A lot of those best. The basic principles on which radios operate may be summarized as follows. The radio system consists of a transmitter and a receiver. The transmitter takes the message to be sent, encodes it in what is known as a sinus wave, and transmits it in the form of waves. The receiver takes in the radio waves and deciphers the message sent on the sinus wave. In this way, the message is received in exactly the same form as it was sent. The word awibi, translated as echo in the above verse, and meaning sound being repeated or returned. That's what it means. May very well be a reference to the transmission of these radio waves. So, it's interesting because how many people took the communication class in college? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, what is effective communication? When A sends a message to B, and B sends the message back to A, and A understands that B got the same message that they transmitted, that's called effective communication. But when A says to B, hang a right down here on Sam Lake and then a left on Dr. Phillips, and B says hang a left down here at Sam Lake and a right on Dr. Phillips, that means you had ineffective communication. So a lost communication is actually perfected, and it's talked about here in the Holy Qur'an. Sounds emitted in the form of sound waves by way of an antenna in order that the receiver can take in the data sent are also met by an antenna linked to the receiver. The purpose behind using antennae is the transmission into space of the waves emitted by the radio transmitter. The receiving antenna is intended to collect as many radio waves and messages as possible. This is why NASA uses giant antennas, or antennae, bowls 70 meters across for its satellites millions of kilometers away in space. There are also radio telescopes, which use radio waves to form images. Since radio waves are very long, a radio telescope has to be much larger in order to collect them as images sufficiently clear to be compared. In order to obtain sharper and better images, astronomers use a connected series of smaller telescopes or receptors. These telescopes act collectively as one very large one, and in physical appearance, these series resemble mountain systems. Now, if you're a teacher, a science teacher, or you have any knowledge about what I'm sharing to expound upon it, please share it with us. Collective learning is great. In addition, repeat. Well, I don't think you'll be lost in a little bit. Okay. Sorry about that. In addition, repeaters are employed to permit radio communication over every great distance. These devices repeat and strengthen weak signals and enable them to be transmitted over considerable distances. Such devices are generally sited on tall buildings or on the top of mountains for preference in order to have the greatest effect. The use of the word awibi, translated as echo in the above verse, exceedingly wise. The statement of, O mountains and birds, echo with him in his praise. In verse 10 of Surah Sabah, may thus be a description of that technology. Now, I wish Jabril was here because Jabril has this wonderful way of describing and explaining things. It's a young student that comes to our class. I miss him today. But basically, we all remember that one part of the seven heavens. Sharon, can you remember which one it is? The stratosphere, ionosphere, mesosphere. Which one is the one that handles the sound waves? Do you remember? Okay. Forgive me. That's all right. But we know that one of the seven heavens is responsible for sound waves. And that was one of the miracles of the Qur'an that we talked about. We broke it down from the Qur'an, and we talked about the seven heavens and how they were like umbrellas of the earth. And we actually had pictures to demonstrate how that works. Everybody remember that? So we're really sort of expounding upon this, how echoes are sent out, and I think you'll see this in the pictures when they come. Picture paints 1,000 words, right? Is that the way you say it? Yeah. And here are radio receivers on mountains, and these things are huge. This is actually in Texas, where this picture came from. You see these huge antennas, or radio receivers. Each of the antenna in the previous picture weighs 212 tons, is as high as a 10-story building, and measures 25 meters across. And this is the reference here where I got that from. Just to give you an idea that the mountains which we study that have pegs that are deeper than the top of the mountain that we see are actually sending and receiving these waves. Okay? So there you saw those receivers. Did you get it? No? Sorry. Would you like me to go over it again? No, okay. I think it's because of the cat. I'm going to blame the cat. Cat kept us awake last night. The next miracle we're going to talk about is the miracle of fire and wood. And this is really, really amazing, the miracle of fire and wood. Does anybody know about this? We do know that, how many people have bought those artificial fire logs from your fireplace? Are they anything at all like wood? No. Nothing. Right. Wood cannot be artificially made. They're making this wood now for patios. It's basically like a plastic. It's like a polymer, they call it, that will never ever rot, but it's not wood. And guess what? Does it burn like wood? Looks like wood, but doesn't operate like wood.
So you get the warmth from propane?
Pardon me?
You get the warmth from propane?
The pretend logs are wrapped in paper, and if I understand correctly, the technology that's used for them is basically sawdust that's somehow put together with a chemical, wrapped in paper, and people burn them in their fireplaces. But as you will see, as I break this down, they do not have the properties of wood, which you'll see as I break it down in chemically. Try to break it down for you chemically. In Surah Al-Waqi'ah, verses 71 to 74, have you thought about the fire that you light? Is it you who makes the trees that fuel it grow, or are we the grower? We have made it to be a reminder and a comfort for travelers in the wild. So glorify the name of your Lord, the Magnificent. We know that if you go back, the Native Americans would take two sticks and rub it together to make a fire. If you talk to a Native American chief, they will teach you lessons about the difference between a spark and an ember and a fire. Most of us think about just the fire. And I'll just try to explain this because it's quite beautiful. If you ever go to a powwow of a Native American, they will take a piece of flint. They will strike it and get a spark. They will take some dry hay or straw, and they will put the spark on that piece of hay, just a spark. And they will blow the spark until they get a fire in their hand. And then they will put the fire under the wood. And they will talk about the difference between a spark and an ember and a fire, and they can teach you probably about 30-minute lecture on each. The difference between a spark, an ember, and a fire, and the different amount of oxygen required to get that ember going versus the fire.
Is people that smoke marijuana or
Wow.
Well, it's not marijuana that they smoke, it's peyote. But
Peyote.
that is before and after. They're able to clearly.
Are they coming here?
So, I'm going to try to slow down because I do want you to get this. I think it's really yes, Lord.
Going back to the first slide, it asked, have you ever thought about this? And I answered, I've never thought about it. So this to me is telling me I need to really think about the things that I take for granted.
Exactly. And you see, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anytime you see in the Quran, folks, in this is a sign. Ponder and reflect on this. What it's telling you is to lay back, get a cup of tea, and ponder and reflect. Because in it is a miracle. Anytime Allah says, in this is a sign for you, that is a mu'jiza. It is a miracle. And when I'm finished on this wood, you're all going to agree with me that it is a miracle. Inshallah. So, one of the chemical substances mainly responsible for the structure of wood is called lignocellulose. Don't get lost in the big word. This substance is a compound of the materials known as lignin and cellulose that give wood its hardness. In terms of chemical structure, wood is made up of 50% cellulose, 25% hemicellulose, and 25% lignin. And this is the source where that information comes from. I want you to understand this chemical composition because scientists today cannot recreate anything similar to wood. They cannot. You just can't do it. An analysis of these substances' chemical formula reveals three vital elements: hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon are the building blocks of millions of substances in nature. But it's a miracle from Allah, these three also combine to give rise to the substance lignocellulose found in plants. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Although scientists know that they contain these substances, they are unable to reproduce this special material in plants. Although these elements, found in large amounts in nature, can easily be obtained, scientists have been unable to obtain a single piece of wood by artificial means, despite having countless examples before them. Yet all the trees we see around us have been ceaselessly producing this compound for millions of years by combining oxygen, carbon, water, and sunlight. Now, let me ask you this, and hopefully I can articulate this correctly. Smokey the Bear says what?
Only you can prevent forest fires. I remember that. I was like,
Can you do that again, please, brother?
I can't because like it's not natural. But
You did it really well that time. I just wanted everybody to get in on that.
What is it again?
it's on YouTube.
Only you can prevent forest fire. Now, is the forest fire healthy in terms of the cycle of life? Absolutely.
Is a forest fire?
So who
healthy?
do you think created Smokey the Bear? the wood industry because they want the wood so they can sell it. But we actually need a certain amount of fires for the universe to operate at maximum capacity. The Smokey the Bear is not a good guy. He's a political ploy, all right?
Just like milk is.
Okay,
All right.
but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's okay to start doing it.
Absolutely. Please. Thank you very much, Lori. Young folks, do not
Play with fire.
play with fire.
Old folks.
That's called a pyromaniac. And old folks either. That's called a pyromaniac for a reason. And most of those people end up in jail, by the way. So I'm not encouraging you to start those fires, but Allah will start them by lightning and strike a tree. But He needs to. When we need that cycle to work, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will strike a tree with lightning and you'll see a tree, a burning bush. Okay. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that.
You know that dollar store sells something, you just push it and it will have a flame and you can put it.
Yes.
A candle, burning. It's so safe. I don't know what they have inside.
Well, it's a form of gas. It's like the lighter.
No, it's just not that one, gas one. Now they are selling a stick.
Right. It's longer, about this long.
Yeah,
And
and you just do
pull the trigger in it.
No, nothing in there. I did not see it. No
I
gas.
promise it's in there.
Petroleum.
It's not petroleum. It's another form, but it is a form of gas. Yeah.
But it
Because
ever
they-
lasting, it has been, up to 3 years, it's never.
You don't start enough fires, sister. And I'm not suggesting anything. All right. Trees are an important sphere of scientific research and inspire scientists who are still struggling to grasp all the details in the creation in a number of areas. The complex structure of the cells that constitute trees have still not been fully unraveled. Despite advances in technology and intense research, the Forestry Commission of Great Britain, one of the world's leading forestry research institutions, says the following under the heading, Lack of Information on the Chemistry and Structure of Wood Fibers. So you see, the things that Allah asks us to contemplate are the things that scientists can't even figure out. So if you really want to increase your iman, your faith, and you want to develop your relationship with Allah, I want to recommend that you get rid of your television and start contemplating some of the miracles of Allah, which means read the Qur'an. Because how many hours could you sit and think about this?
A lot.
It's perplexing. Despite the knowledge resulting from earlier and ongoing research, there still exists a lack of information on the chemistry and structure of wood fibers. Large variations can be found within a single tree, from the pith to the bark, and from the base to the top of a tree. Often the chemistry and structure of a wood cell are extremely heterogeneous and difficult to investigate with conventional techniques. And here is the resource for that. And if you'll notice, that's a 2007 resource. The previous one was a 2005. So I'm not talking about research that's old here. I'm talking about stuff that they're still trying to figure out today that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called our attention to. A paper in the scientific journal Plant Physiology titled Our Understanding of How Wood Develops is Not Complete describes the unlimited knowledge of the subject that scientists possess. And here's the quote. Considering the important role that wood is foreseen to play in the near future, it is surprising to see that our understanding of how wood develops is far from complete. With a few exceptions, very little is known about the cellular, molecular, and developmental process that underlie wood formation. Xylogenous represents an example of cell differentiation in an exceptionally complex form. The process is controlled by a wide variety of factors, both exogenous, photoperiod and temperature, and endogenous, photohormones, and by interaction between them. I know this is a little bit complex. Just try to go with it. Tell me to slow down if I need to, so that you can take it in. But I think that it's really profound if we look at scientists, pure articles from PhD people that don't understand this, and then we see that Allah has called our attention to this. I think it's remarkable, and I think it fortifies for us this amazing Qur'an that we have. This kalam, this speech of Allah that has never changed. The only divine revelation that has not been tainted by man. Who remembers the miracle from the Qur'an? Allah protected it. Remember I taught you that, how that Allah has protected this book and no one will ever contaminate it. That's right.
I have a suggestion.
Yes.
Can you keep reminding us to do that? Because when I get here, I'm like, I forget that we have to reflect on it.
I will keep reminding you, because after we finish the miracles, inshallah, we're going to go into the tafsir of Qur'an, which I'm really excited. I can't wait to get there. But a lot of the family has said, Imam, please exhaust us on these miracles first. And so that's what I'm doing. And I don't know if I'll get through it really and truly, because there's so many. I have a book that is about 1 inch thick that is all about the miracles of the numbers in the Quran. And it's just phenomenal. As a matter of fact, when I read that book, I had to put it down because it was exhausting. Exhausting in a sort of nice way, but it was just so deep that I could only read a certain amount and reflect a certain bit at a time. But it will show you how letters and formulation of letters and numbers of letters have a miraculous meaning. So it's really quite phenomenal. This process is controlled by a wide variety of factors. I read this, didn't I? No, I didn't. Both exogenous, photoperiod and temperature, and endogenous, photohormones, and by interaction between them. It is driven by the coordinated expression of numerous structural genes, some of known function, involved in cell origination, differentiation, programmed cell death, and heartwood, otherwise known as HW. Formation, and by virtually unknown regulatory genes, orchestrating this ordered developmental sequence. And I know this is sort of complicated, but I think it's important for us to see that great scientists in the world do not understand this. And I just sort of imagine sitting in the class of one of the professors that wrote this and asking them, listen, can you just break down these words for me? And how frustrated they might would get with me. The presence of gene families and the extreme plasticity of the metabolism involved is exemplified by the universal behavior of plants with transformed cell walls. For review, see Fogart et al. 2000. Add a further complexity to our understanding of the process of wood formation. And so here is Plant Physiology, a book where this quote came from. So this is something, what is amazing to me is that the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to reflect on, people out there in the world are earning money reflecting on these things and writing grants to get money so that they can study these things. And this is really sad for me because scholarship in the Islamic world is dying. If you look at the history of Islam, we were on the cutting edge. The Muslims gave the zero. If the Muslims had not given the zero to algebra, we would still be doing everything in Roman numbers. But if you go back in centuries, Muslims were the scientists. They were on the cutting edge. And my prayer is that somehow we can revive scholarship among the Muslims. Because we are taught that we should be learning from the cradle to the grave. Learning should never stop for a Muslim. And I'm sorry my mom stepped out. I think she got a phone call. But you know, here's a person who was on the cutting edge of research on the albino gene in her time, but she still comes to learn. And she talks about the inspiration of this class for her. And that's obviously the grandmother of our class. And that's how we should be. We should look at knowledge and be inspired by it. And so young people, I want to encourage you, don't even think about, you know, stopping studying until you have at least a master's or a PhD. You know, go for the gusto in terms of education. Be on the cutting edge of your field. The extraordinary creation in wood is emphasized thus in another scientific journal called the Annals of Botany. Listen to what this scholar says. Wood formation is a highly complicated process involving an unbelievable variety of metabolic steps in the roots, stem and crown, and shrubs and trees. At the center of these processes is cambial activity, which results in the release of young woody cells that undergo maturation until autolysis of the protoplast, indicating the final development stage. The extraordinary creation of wood is emphasized thus in another scientific journal. Continues. Later on in various tree species, woody cells become further modified by an additional process called heartwood formation. The properties of wood that make it an appropriate raw material for many purposes are largely determined by the specific architecture of the cell walls. Difficulties in investigating these many developmental stages appear when routine techniques which work well for soft plant tissue are applied. Therefore, in most cases, these techniques need modification or the use of completely revised photocells to yield good results for woody tissue. And here, this is the resource of that. So, it's hard to understand even what these scholars are saying. Just what are they saying? So if you take this to these kind of levels, you will have something to contemplate, something to make more wrinkles in your gray matter, and actually to engage your mind. And there's a large amount of resource that the reason that people get dementia and Alzheimer's is because they do not exercise their brain. What percentage of our brain do we use?
Less than 10%.
Less than 10%. These details in the creation of wood remind us, as set out in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, that wood cannot be made by human beings. Just a few of the inimitable features of wood which cannot be produced artificially are as follows. The hard and resistant nature of wood is the result of the cellulose fibers it contains. Because cellulose is hard and insoluble in water, it is the property of cellulose that makes the use of wood in construction so advantageous. Cellulose, described as contractible or incomparable substance, has for centuries been used a great deal more than other materials in keeping wooden buildings standing, other buildings, bridges, and many other structures. Now, we're going to get into this, but what amazes me is that you have these fine tubes in a tree that take water to the ends of the leaves, right? Right?
Yes.
So this tree has lots of water in it, yet it can burn. Try to burn water. You can't. If you boil it and boil pot dry, it evaporates into the air and comes back somewhere. Yet you can burn a tree that has so much water in it. And every couple of weeks we have a major forest fire out in California, right? And thousands of acres of wetlands and trees are burned. It's hard to understand that, isn't it?
It is, I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Cellulose is combustible.
Cellulose, and we're going to talk about that, the combustibility of cellulose. Wood consists of parallel columns made up of convex cells laid end to end. These are surrounded by cellulose fibers in spiral form. In addition, these cells are contained in lignin, a substance made from a complex polymer structure resin. These spirally enclosed layers make up 80% of the thickness of the cell wall and are the part bearing the main load. When a wood cell collapses internally, it absorbs the shock of a blow by detaching itself from the surrounding cells. Even when such collapses causes a crack along the length of the fiber, the wood remains unharmed. This is why wood is strong enough to bear specific loads even if it is broken. What always amazes me is that you can take a 8,000-pound vehicle, wrap it around a tree, total the vehicle, and the tree will be just fine. Amazing. You can wrap a clothesline around a tree and the tree will grow around it. It will not hurt the tree. In terms of absorbing the energy of low-speed blows and reducing the damage therefrom, wood is most important material. The Second World War plane, known as the Mosquito, was made by compressing wood between strips of fiberboard, making it the most damage-resistant plane of its time. The hardness and resistant nature of wood make it a very reliable material, because wood breaks or cracks slowly enough to be visible from the outside, and that gives people enough time to take the necessary precautions. Now, what amazes me is that we talk about this wood and how strong it is. A lot calls our attention to it, but what happens when that little termite comes along? Now, is that unbelievable? That Allah calls us to the attention of this wood that has all of this durability, but this little termite can come along and they can all hold hands and hold up a house. How many people have seen a house being tinted here in Florida, poisoning our environment? Yeah. And by the way, this is the resource that this came from. A material based on the structure of wood can be up to 50 times more resistant than other synthetic materials in use today. I find it amazing that metal, how pliable metal is. How hard is it to arch a tree? What will happen to the tree if you try to arch it?
It's supposed to crack.
It'll snap. With all that water in it, yet cabinet makers and contractors can make beautiful arches with their skills out of wood. This unique structure of wood is today used in materials developed to protect against the impact of high-speed and destructive fragments such as bombs and bullets. Is anybody here a hunter? Well, I know Lori's family is. Will a bullet go through a tree?
No.
I just wanted to see it. Think about that. Will a bullet go through drywall?
Yeah.
Of course it will. Isn't that amazing? That this tree, which is just these hollow stems with water in it, a bullet can't go through it. Something to reflect on. Scientists have never been able to replicate a piece of wood with all its many attributes. Every detail in the creation of wood, the thickness of the internal layers, the level of compression, the number of vessels, their layout, and the material inside it have been specially created to result in that resistance. Amazing. The hydraulic system that raises water many meters against the force of gravity. Does anybody know how tall the highest trees are?
Man, they're like hundreds of feet.
Hundreds of feet in the redwood forest, right?
They're hundreds of feet.
Imagine that you're trying to pump water out of a basement. Anybody ever had water problems in a basement? You can't even get a sump pump to work effectively. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the water from the earth all the way up to the top of these trees and feeds all the leaves. MashaAllah. The dead part of wood, the xylem, contains hollow channels. These, also known as wood vessels, consist of inanimate cells that gradually lose their nuclei and cytoplasms piled one on top of the other. Long, thin wood vessels from when the membranes between the cells dissolve and disappear. It's a process that's just unbelievable. When I was working on this, tried to wrap my head around this. I tried to look for pictures to help me understand it at a deeper level. And you'll see a few pictures that I found, but it's just beyond comprehension. It really is. It's unfathomable when you think about it. Yes, Lord.
Are there genetically modified wood?
To my knowledge, there's no genetically modified wood. You can genetically modify corn and vegetables and fruits, which we know nowadays we've got a big problem with the GMOs. But you can't genetically modify wood. Just can't do it. I deem by Allah that. And if I'm wrong, please correct me, folks. Roots spreading out beneath the soil carry the water and minerals the plant needs upward through these tissues and transmits them as far as the leaves. The way the roots absorb the water in the ground is literally reminiscent of the best bore techniques. The test bore technique, sorry. The roots have no engines to initiate the water absorption process. Neither do they have any technical equipment with which to pump water and minerals for distances of up to several meters. But the roots absorb the water in the depths of the soil by spreading over a very wide area. Now, what amazes me is how we have all this sand here in Florida. Does sand and water mix well? No. And yet we have these amazing trees. The dead part of the wood, the xylem, contains hollow channels. These, also known as wood vessels, consist of inanimate cells that gradually lose their nuclei and cytoplasms piled one on top of another. Long, thin wood vessels form when the membrane between the cells dissolve and disappear. Roots spreading out beneath the soil carry the water. This looks like, oh, I'm doing something wrong here, sorry. Good. Now here's hardwood, and here are these cells, a picture of these cells that I was talking about. It's amazing how you see the bigger ones and then all of the small ones. As seen in the picture, wood consists of tube or straw-shaped cells. By combining one on top of the other, these cells, which make up the roots and trunks of plants, serve as channels that carry water and minerals right through the plant. This tissue, known as xylem, also constitutes a powerful structure that enables the plant to remain upright. You can't make sense of that, folks. How can something that is porous reach hundreds of feet, carry water up it, and at the same time give it structure? It's just you can't, it's unbelievable. It's the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, it's sort of like thinking about standing on water. Anybody here stand on water? Only Jesus did that. Here's another picture of this porous structure of wood.
Is that somebody's thumb at the bottom?
That's somebody's thumb at the bottom. Yeah. In the previous picture can be seen a slice of dry wood in cross sections. When dried out, the tube-like channels become hollow, as shown in the illustration. Roots capable of selecting minerals from the soil. Now this is amazing, folks. Plants draw all the mineral nutrients they need, such as potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur from the soil. Since the substances are not found separately in the soil, they absorb them as ions, positive and negatively charged atoms. Of all the many inorganic ions in dissolved state in the soil, plants absorb only the 14 they need. Now design a machine that will separate out of all these chemicals just 14 things. Do we have any engineers here today? That's unusual in the Muslim community, not to have any engineers in the bus.
They must be asleep.
The iron concentration inside plant cells is 1,000 times greater than that in the soil outside. Now how do you put that together? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this amazing tree that sucks out these 14 chemicals that it needs, and then when it gets it inside the plant, it's 1,000 times greater than that in the soil outside. Is that a miracle, folks?
Yes.
Malcolm Wilkins' Plant Watching, Facts on File publication, New York, 1988, page 119. Under normal conditions, an exchange of matter from a high-density region to a lower-density one will take place. But exactly the opposite happens in plant roots, and the ions in the soil are easily able to pass into the root cells. And here's the source for that piece of information. Because of this state of affairs that operates contrary to the pressure system, contrary to gravity, even contrary to physics, if you think about pounds per square inches hitting something, this even seems to go against the grain of physics. Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
Yes.
It's all right to disagree with me, okay? The plant uses a high level of energy in the pumping process. In addition, in the plant roots taking up ions from the soil, there needs to be an identification system that attracts only the wanted ions and repels the unwanted ones. We can't even do that as humans.
But would this be close to how you could take a plant that's white, put coloring in the water, and then it changes the color of the plant through...
Well, that gives you an idea exactly how that it pulls up these things all the way to the top. How many people have taken a jonquil or a daffodil, we call it in the South, and put a different color of water in it, and it would manifest itself in the tips of that flower?
I got it. The other 5% of my brain was working.
I'm doing that. This shows that the ion pumps in the root cells are no ordinary pumps, but possess the ability to select between ions, bearing in mind that the cell and the plant roots are made up of atoms devoid of any intelligence or consciousness. One can better see what an extraordinary process ion selection truly is. I mean, those of us who search for a mate had a harder time finding a mate than the tree has getting its iron.
Not me.
Pretty amazing. Not you, not some of us, but a lot of us is pretty difficult. It's amazing. The iron concentration inside plant cells. Wait a minute, I'm doing something wrong here today. The photosynthesis system, which operates like a miniature factory, takes place in an organelle known as the chloroplast. Chloroplasts are just 1/1000th of a millimeter in size. Who can tell me what a millimeter is? 1/10 of a centimeter. Listen, folks, this is the miracle of this wood we're talking about. Chloroplasts are just 1/1000th of a milliliter in size, for which reason they can only be seen under the microscope. When solar energy falls on the leaf, they transmit it to the layers inside it. Chlorophylls inside the chloroplast in the leaf cells convert this light energy into chemical energy. The plant, obtaining this chemical energy, immediately uses it in obtaining nutrients. It took scientists until the mid-20th century to obtain this information, summarized in just a few lines here. What, this over here?
The lines in the Qur'an.
Okay.
This is intense stuff.
It is very intense. I do not expect you to get all this, but I feel that I would be doing a disservice to you not to point out all that scientists have written about this, and they still don't know what they're talking about, basically.
I don't know.
They're just giving you a little bit of information. They don't have the whole picture. Have you thought about the fire that you light? It is you who make the trees that fuel it. Is it you who make the trees that fuel it grow? Or are we the growers? And certainly we know that, yes, Naran asked me to go back to the verse.
Oh, I didn't know.
Sorry about that. No, I'm just going to read it, if it's all right, because it gets very complicated when I'm going back and forth in slides. Particularly because I've got two different computers at work here. So we clearly know that men or women are not able to create something that does this amazing job of absorption that a tree does and build houses for us that are very stable. The majority of houses sustain tornadoes, the majority do, and all kinds of acts of God, destructive as they can be. They usually, most of them, withstand. What's amazing is that, I don't know if you know this, but in the United States of America, when you see all of these housing developments, do you know how long they think that these houses will be in existence before they'll tear them down and build another one?
30 years?
25 to 30 years.
No mortgage.
Okay. Salam alaikum. So it's quite amazing, isn't it? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps producing all of this wood, this amazing substance, and we just keep tearing down and rebuilding, tearing down and rebuilding. Yes, brother.
What is the Arabic word for wood?
Mason, what is the Arabic word for wood?
Kasha.
Kasha. Oh, I don't have it. I'm drawing a blank here. Is it this? Kasha? No, okay. But it's the cat. I'm pretty sure. No? The off. This one? No. You want to come and write it for us? Oh, you have top.
Yes.
Okay, mashallah. Thank you. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. And I apologize. I know that this is quite a tough class, and for those of you who are here for the first time, may Allah bless you, because most of our classes are much more dynamic than this. This is a little heavy, I must say. But it's just that I felt I really wanted you to reflect on all of this information because it's so profound. It's absolutely miraculous. So forgive me if it's a hardship for you to endure this. Pages of chain reactions are written to describe the whole process of photosynthesis. But some links in the chain are still unknown. Yet plants have been performing these processes uninterruptedly for hundreds of millions of years, thus providing the earth with food and oxygen. The fact that not a single cell constituting wood can be made by artificial means, and human beings' helplessness in the face of dead wood cells, shows the presence of a sublime creator. The properties of wood, about which many volumes could be written, their countless aspects that so inspire scientists, all reveal the sublime knowledge and intellect behind the creation of wood. This intelligence and knowledge manifested in wood belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, the creator and sole Lord of all things. And the next thing that I said we would talk about today to follow up this verse is the aerodynamic forces and the flight program birds, which is really, really amazing, folks. And Surah An-Nahl, the bee, Surah 16 and verse 79. Do they not see the birds suspended in midair up in the sky? Nothing holds them there except Allah. There are certainly signs in that for people who believe. If you throw a ball up in the air, what's going to happen to it?
It's going to come back down.
It's going to come down. Has anybody ever held a little bird in your hand? When we think about gravity, that light bird up there, even its wings, the way it works, and we'll see a slide on that. It's a miracle. There's nothing that man can put up there that's not going to fall down except planes and certain things that they created with engines, powerful engines. And what was the engineering behind all of those things that are staying up there? What Allah created, birds, exactly. Due to the force of gravity, all bodies left in the air will eventually fall to earth, either fast or slowly. Everything living or otherwise is subject to gravity. But as a miracle of Allah, birds are able to resist this force and fly upward and downward in the air. They maneuver in the air and sometimes even fold their wings and glide through it. I always wanted to fly, and I don't mean fly a plane, I've done that before. But as a human, I used to dream. I've always been a human, by the way. I used to dream of flying, and I would have dreams as a kid that were so real, and I thought I was flying. It felt like I was flying. At least I thought it did anyway. And I didn't do drugs, by the way. I think I should preface that. All details in birds, from their feathers to their lungs, from the arrangements of their feathers to the shape of their wings, are equipped with a special feature and order intended to enable them to fly. A chick, totally unaware of the act of flight and the laws of aerodynamics, is born with the ability to fly. The chick launches itself downwards and begins to fly, just as if it knew its body was created for flight. This is not information that is taught subsequently or that a bird learns in an aerodynamic class by trial and error. The way a bird knows it has the body structure needed to fly, finds the courage to launch itself into the air, and then flies without hitting the ground, all happens through a loss of inspiration. And it's sort of neat because, you know, if you study birds, if there's a sort of lazy bird in the family, the father will sort of come and say it's time for you to go. I think we can learn a lesson from this actually. It's sort of time for you to go now and fly. And he kicks the bird out of the nest, and what happens? The bird finds out that he can fly. Mashallah. The Arabic word yumsikuhunna, translated as holds, in verse 79 of Surah An-Nahl, means not letting them go, taking them, catching them, or holding them. The word is the present tense of the verse amsaka, meaning to catch with the hand, hold, and pull back. With this word, our Almighty Lord reveals that He holds the birds in the air and that it flies by His command. Bird flight is still the subject of wide-ranging research by scientists. Having observed the perfection in bird flight, scientists use the avian body and avian flight as direct models in producing such vehicles as airplanes and jets. Verse 79 of Surah An-Nahl may in one way be indicating the way that birds comply with the aerodynamic laws created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they fly. Allah knows best. The science of aerodynamic studies the behavior of solid bodies in a fluid environment such as air. For example, as a plane moves through the air, various forces emerge that affect the movement. In order for the plane to move as planned and not to run into any unexpected forces or resistance, the plane is tested beforehand against the resistance exhibited by the air. Its movement is planned as a result of lengthy calculations, measurements, and experiments. But the birds created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't have to do any calculus, He doesn't have to do any long math problems, or she, to fly. They just go out of the nest and Allah holds them in the air. MashaAllah. Yes.
I'm on that same thing, bees. Man has said the bees should not fly because their bodies are too big for their wings, yet they fly.
Look at a bumblebee. The mass of a bumblebee's body, and look at the little wings on a bumblebee. Does it make sense, right? The things of Allah don't always make sense. That's why we ponder, and that's why we reflect on the signs of Allah. The way that birds comply with the principles of aerodynamics continues to astonish scientists. Using no form of trial and error, they cope with the laws of aerodynamics in the most perfect manner. Now, has anybody here done skydiving? One person. How about hang gliding? How many people here would like to jump off of Table Mountain, or that's the third highest mountain in the world, without any training? And yet birds, yeah, that's because your amygdala isn't developed. But that's okay, mashallah. I like the spirit. When I was young, I might have said the same thing. But that's the amazing miracle in these miracles. And yet, that was something I wanted to do when I was a young man. I wanted to hang glide off Table Mountain. It just never happened. That's the third highest mountain in the world, by the way. But I used to watch people do that, and I just thought it was so exhilarating. It was amazing. And I never heard of anyone getting hurt. But they would fly off the mountain and land on the beach. It was too neat.
You can still do it today.
Not now that I've had a stroke. I don't know. I think that would be real interesting and entertaining for everybody there.
And not now he's married to me either.
The use of the word musakha. Sister, help me with this word in Arabic. Oh, brother. It's the word for suspended in Arabic. I'm still working on my Arabic, folks. If I had it in Arabic, I could read it. But because I put it in transliteration form, it's harder. In the verse to describe bird flight is exceedingly wise because it suggests that they have been encouraged to a specific end, have had to do something, have submitted or bowed their heads, have bound themselves to Allah, or have submitted to His laws. In that way, the verse may be indicating the way that aerodynamic laws have a determined influence on bird flight. Allah knows best. At first sight, there would appear to be nothing to make it difficult for birds to fly. But according to aerodynamics, any object flying in the air is subject to various different forces. The best known of these are gravity, propulsion, drag, and lift. In order for meaningful flight to take place, these forces have to be balanced. For example, if gravity is stronger than the other forces, the bird will fall to earth. That is why the word in the verse is the best possible expression of birds, conditioned as they are subjected to these forces. Now we all know that all the animals are praising Allah, that everything in Allah's creation is praising Him. The trees are in ruku'. They're all bowing to Allah. The cows are bowing to Allah. The horses, the dogs, the cats, the cockroaches, the mountains, all of Allah's creation without exception is bowing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in submission. The sun is a Muslim. The moon is a Muslim in submission to Allah. Rising, we know when it's going to rise and we know when it's going to set by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these things are Muslim, brothers and sisters, submitting to the will of Allah. The presence in the Qur'an of expressions containing such information at a time when no science of aerodynamics or mechanics existed, once again reveals that the Qur'an is a divine text. MashaAllah. And here's the aerodynamic forces in the flight program birds. We look at propulsion, drag, lift, and weight. All of them have to be in balance. And who holds them up there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The illustration shows the main forces acting on a bird during flight. And this is the resource where we got that picture from. Here's another picture just showing you how this actually sort of takes place, breaking it down for you. The tops of birds' wings are curved, the bottoms flat. This shape produces low pressure on the top compared to the bottom. This difference in air pressure produces a lift force that enables the bird to rise in the air by beating its wings upward, which, as you can see to the right. The air moving rapidly around the bird's wings produces the lift force. The bird bends its wings in order to obtain greater lift force. The air flowing over the wings is thus accelerated. If it inclines its wings upward at a very steep angle, air cannot easily flow to the upper parts of the wings, and the bird loses speed and stalls. Through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's inspiration, birds make use of the principles of aerodynamics as they fly. Amazing, right? Beautiful. In addition to the aerodynamic perfection in bird flight, scientists are also researching the migrations of thousands of kilometers or miles that they make. Ornithologists, bird lovers, have today concluded that these are literally programmed in them. The way that young birds are able to undertake long and arduous journeys with no guide or previous experience is the most obvious example of this. This Arabic word, musakharatan. Is that right, sister, brother? Say it again for everybody. Musakharatan. In the verse quoted above implies being encouraged toward a specific target. And this will unfold in a great way. We know that some birds, for example, every year at a certain time, with no training, no classes, no flight 101, will migrate 10,000 miles. If the weather conditions on the way are not perfect, what will they do? They will come back and make the journey again. If I was on my way to North Carolina, which is about a 10-hour drive for me, and I got a third of the way there and had a flat tire, I'd probably want to just come back home. But these little birds, with no training, totally being held by Allah, programmed by Allah, are going to go 10,000 miles, some of them. And if the conditions aren't right, come home and then go back. And guess what, folks? They never complain. They just do what Allah has instinctually inspired them to do. That's something for us to learn from, right? It's amazing, mashallah. Clearly revealing that birds obey the instructions they are given when following the directions set out for them. There is no possibility of birds which are devoid of intellect and consciousness managing to make their own calculations as they fly along. They don't have autopilot that's sending a message back and forth. They just have Allah holding them and inspiring them. Scientists today are agreed that these extraordinary abilities in birds are pre-programmed in them. This is set out in an article in the journal Science. There is good evidence that young birds are equipped with endogenous migratory programs which tell them roughly how many days or nights that they must fly and in what direction. SubhanAllah. I remember I drove out to California from North Carolina. I drove back from California with a pregnant wife and 2 babies, both breastfeeding one time. And I didn't know how many days it was going to take me. I even had the trip tip from AAA that told me places to stop to eat, about the amount of time I would need to drive, but it never worked. Because you know babies don't feed on your schedule.
They have their own.
And then, of course, our car caught on fire in the desert one time. We hadn't planned on that. That wasn't part of our flight plan. So, and of course, here's the site that I got this from. And this is French, and I don't speak French. But in this French book, Professor Pierre-Jean Hamburger, I don't know how he got the name hamburger at the end, but alhamdulillah. Hope he got some lettuce and tomato with it. University describes the extraordinary 24,000 kilometer journey made by the shearwater that lives in the Pacific Ocean. It sets out from the coast of Australia. From there it flies straight southward to the Pacific. Then it Pacific. What did I say? Pacific? That's just a speech impediment. Forgive me. Pacific. Then it turns north and flies along the coast of Japan until it reaches the Bering Sea, where it can rest for a while. Following that break, it sets off again, and this time heads south, crossing the western coast of America. It arrives in California. It then crosses the Pacific to return to its starting point. MashaAllah. See, these are world tourists, these birds. We would be exhausted. I've never seen a bird look tired. They just are amazing. And I love the hummingbirds. They just amaze me. And this is another miracle of science when you watch them eating, hovering like a helicopter, except much more beautiful. MashaAllah. Power and fragility. Jazakallah khairan, sister.
Oh, the French cook over here, she's Moroccan.
That's right. Okay. All right. Look at this, folks. The route and timing of this 15,000 mile, 24,000 kilometer, figure 8 journey, it makes every year never change. Now, you see, if it was humans, we would go across the United States one time on 10, the next time we would try 40, and then we would try another route. We would keep looking for an easier way. The journey in question lasts a whole 6 months.
We die after a week.
Always coming to an end in the 3rd week of September on the island it left 6 months before. At the nest it left 6 months before. Now that's pretty amazing because we have GPS, we have Google, we have every kind of map quest you can imagine, and we still can't find our way home sometimes. Or we certainly can't find our way to where we're going. Amazing, huh? MashaAllah. What comes next is even more astonishing. After their return, the birds clean their nest, mate, lay a single egg over the last 10 days of October. The chicks hatch out 2 months later, grow very fast, and are cared for over 3 months until their parents set out on that next stupendous journey. Please. 2 weeks later. Isn't this exhausting, folks, just listening to the life of these birds? I'm tired. I want to clock. I want to take a nap. 2 weeks later, around the middle of April, it is time for the young birds to take wing on their journey. They follow exactly the same route as that described above, with no guide. The explanation is so obvious. These birds must have all the directions for such a journey within the inherited characteristics passed on within the egg. Some people may claim that birds navigate by the sun and stars, or follow the winds prevailing along their route on this journey out and back. But it is clear that these factors cannot determine the journey's geographical and chronological accuracy. And here's this French hamburger.
Blue cheese, that's right. Blue cheese on that bread.
Professor Peter Berthold is a famous ornithologist who has investigated bird migration for 20 years, folks. Now, you see, we are taxed today. A lot of you go say, I can't wait for damn sites to stop today. We are taxed just by contemplating for an hour and a half. This guy's been doing this 20 years. I wonder what he looks like.
He's a real bird bracer.
Hey, all right?
Y'all doing fine. I'm just cracking it up here. But he's been obeying Allah for 20 years. And he's the president of the Max Planck Institute Ornithological Research Center in Germany.
Is he Muslim?
No, he's not. I'm going to point that out in another slide. You're ahead of me. He says the following about bird migration. Every year, an estimated 50 billion birds make migratory journeys along a network of routes that encompasses the whole world, sometimes traveling tens of thousands of kilometers, crossing continents and oceans. Migratory birds have become so well adapted to this task that they can traverse the largest deserts and seas, the highest mountains and expanses of ice. Migratory birds have comprehensive, detailed, innate spatio-temporal programs for successful migration. And as I said before, sometimes we can't go 11 miles in the city without getting tangled up. Such programs evidently enable even young, inexperienced birds to migrate alone, with no adult guide, to the species or population-specific winter quarters that they have never seen before. As will be explained further below, they do this by vector navigation, referring to a vector composed of a genetically predetermined migratory direction and to a time plan also genetically predetermined for the course of migration. It follows that the departure time is programmed by genetic factors. And we'll stop there today, mashallah. But I think that it is amazing that I can see the class, and for Amanda and Yazin, talk to other family members. We've been having this class since 2007. Today's been a pretty heavy class.
That's kind of tough day to walk in on.
Usually I cry almost every class. I'm a crybaby, so you should know that. When I talk about Allah, I often cry. This class is actually, as I've been looking at this material and studying this material, it has really just been amazing. And I want so badly for you to contemplate, that's why I'm presenting all this detail. Hoping that every time you see in the Quran something that says, "In this is a sign for you," that you'll study it and you'll see what is the sign. And you'll look at the miraculous way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works in all of His creation, inshallah. I love you all for the sake of Allah. Same time next week, inshallah, same place. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you'd like to stay around,
That includes another Sunday class with Imam Sykes. And more standby.
1:45.